Have you ever tried to find someone's contact information and you just can't find it? You're trying to send an editor a pitch at a magazine, or you're trying to figure out how to send some marketing stuff over to a company that you think you'd be a really good fit for to help with their content. And man, it can be really difficult sometimes to find it, but there are a few strategies and tips and tricks that we can use to find the right contact information so we can reach out to the right person without bugging a whole bunch of people in the way. So, um, we got a dog on the move already. So, the first thing is that we have to figure out who to contact, right? So, this means when we're looking at editors, that means we need to look through the masthead. We need to find the right editor to reach out to. And basically, what we want to do is if it's a very small magazine, like a trade magazine, their stuff is really easy to find. It's usually just on the website. You can just find their contact info, usually in the contact. Hey, Vicky, welcome in. Morning. I like that, Vicky. So usually you can just find their contact info on the website. Like it just says contact us, or there's usually a masthead, a digital masthead online on trade magazines. But if you're doing bigger magazines, if you're looking for greetings, if you're looking for specific contact information for more print magazines or bigger magazines, sometimes you have to go through kind of a maze to figure that out. So basically, what you want to be doing is figuring out which editor on there is the right one. And sometimes there's just so many editors. So I would start with a small hanging, the low hanging fruit. Basically, like if you're going to pitch a food story or a travel story or a health story, figure out if there's an editor that specifically runs that section, right? So then we figure out, okay, cool, there's a health editor, we reach out to this person. That's your low hanging fruit. If there's a whole bunch of editors that edit throughout the magazine, pick the one that does a lot of work that isn't running the whole ship, right? So not the editor-in-chief. Hey, Getty, welcome in. Hope you guys are doing well today on a Friday before the holiday weekend. So pick the one that isn't the editor-in-chief, not the editorial director, not the creative chief, or any of the other interesting titles that people have these days. Pick something that is sort of like the senior editor, or not the editorial assistant, but someone in a senior position. So the senior editor, someone who you see their name often in their copy. You want to pick someone who definitely takes pitches. And it's kind of that middle ground, not the highest editor, not the lowest editor, but kind of in the middle. So once you kind of figure out who that is, so now that we have our trade magazines, usually they have their contact info on the website. So that's kind of taken care of. It's pretty easy to find. And if you can't find it, a lot of times there's press releases or something that you can find that will end up working really well for finding that contact info for a trade magazine. Sometimes they have their info, like if they do trade shows, if that magazine is part of trade shows or sponsoring a trade show, you'll find contact information about the trade show, and then their email will be there. But with bigger magazines, sometimes you have to figure out the convention. Sometimes you have to figure out, is it first name dot last name at magazine.com, or is it first initial last name at the brand that they work for rather than the specific magazine. So a lot of the big magazines, right, they're owned by Meredith or Condé Nast or bigger types of companies that have tons of different publications. So what we need to do here oftentimes is we can find their email addresses through figuring it out, right? Like there's only so many conventions that are typically normal for email addresses, right? It's like first name dot last name at company, or it's first name at company.com, or it's first initial last name. Like there's always a convention here. It's either like there's a dot somewhere between the first name and the last name, or it's just their first name, or sometimes they get tricky and they end up doing last name dot first name at company.com. But as long as you kind of switch up these different conventions, usually you can figure it out. So that's one way. The second way is to use some sort of resource. So I always liked Media Bistro because they had a How to Pitch series where you can subscribe, and I think it was like under $100 a year, where you can get contact information for editors and actually learn what they want you to pitch. So it ends up being this really easy way to find their contact information and then also pitch them the right stuff. Then you can also use, I like Dream of Travel Writing by Gabby Logan. So it's just dreamoftravelwriting.com, but she has the travel magazine database. And within that, it's not just travel publications, it's all these different types of publications that take travel stories or travel-ish stories. And in there, there's plenty of information about not only what to pitch and who to pitch, but their email address. And as you go along and learn more about magazines, it's a lot easier to pick up the email conventions. Like, is it first name, last name at company.com or magazine.com? It's a lot easier to figure it out. So I like using Media Bistro and I like the travel magazine database, but I also kind of like looking for things like press releases, or sometimes editors end up sharing their email address on Twitter. They're looking for pitches. So you can go to Twitter and, scroll as far as you can down in their tweets and just do Command F or Control F and search for .com. And sometimes they have their email address in there and you can find it. I've done that a ton of times. Like every once in a while, even editors at top magazines have posted their email address as a tweet or on Instagram or something, and you can go find it. And it's a really nice tip and trick to kind of get there pretty quickly to send them a pitch. The other part is that sometimes you can reach out to your writer network. You're like, hey, I've tried all these conventions. I've tried all these things. I can't figure it out. Like maybe they switch their email convention. I know that I've had several editors who have different conventions. They work at the same magazine, but their email address conventions are different. So sometimes you can reach out to your writer friends and say like, hey, I've tried all these things. I can't figure it out. Has anyone spoken to this editor at this magazine? Can you give me some contact info or at least the convention so I can kind of figure it out? So that really helps. The other thing we can do, especially with magazines, is there's lots of conferences. Like there's the ASJA conference and lots of different editorial conferences we can go to not only meet editors, but they share their information as part of being a speaker at the conference or being on a panel. And getting that information from a conference is super great. Like you sign up for the conference, pay for your fee, whatever, pay for your entry, and then bam, you can connect with editors, you can talk to them, they can meet you face to face, you can get their email, all their contact info, and that is super helpful. So when we're doing magazines, a lot of the stuff that we end up doing is for bigger magazines. Trade publications are a lot easier to find. So we can go through all these different steps to find contact information for big magazines. And most of the time, like to be honest, there have been times where I've guessed like 10 or 12 different emails and finally gotten the right one because I just couldn't find it. But if you're really struggling and you can't figure it out from any of those resources, you have no writer friends who will share their email or who will say the convention is this or whatever, if you get kind of stuck, I always like using hunter.io. And you can use this for business or magazines. You literally just put in the URL of the website and it pulls up a whole bunch of email conventions. So this works for magazines, but it also works for businesses. So we'll transition into businesses in a second. But if you're really struggling and you've tried all these conventions and you can't figure it out, put the website, the magazine's website into hunter.io. And all these emails will pop up. And they're probably going to be really different. Some of them might be one like first name, last name. Some might be like just their first name. Some might be just their last name. But at least it gives you an idea of like, hey, these are generally kind of where we're going. This is kind of in the realm of possibility of what I should be trying to figure out their email address. So all those things really help you figure out how to not only like figure out the right editor, but also get their email and send them a message, send them a pitch. If you don't feel comfortable using Hunter.io, you can always hop on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the easiest way to, like one of the easiest ways to find not only who you need to send the pitch to, but their email address. So you can hop into their LinkedIn profile, find the magazine, find the masthead of the magazine, then go to LinkedIn and find that person on LinkedIn. And sometimes they share their contact info within their profile. Sometimes they share it as a post that they put up on LinkedIn, and that can always help. So try that as well. But that kind of adds into our Hunter.io. So when we're using Hunter.io for businesses, so now let's take our steps over to our business realm. We're looking at companies, we're looking at marketing directors, content marketing people, content strategy, all of those people that we want to contact to send our LOIs to. Those contact info, it's a lot easier to find with Hunter.io. So you put in the URL of that company's website, boom, it brings up those emails. But a lot of times, same thing. On LinkedIn, you go in LinkedIn, you go to people in their company, you search for content, and if that doesn't bring anybody up, search for marketing. And whoever that brings up, the person who does like the actual content work, not the person who's overseeing the whole operation, but the person who does the content, that's who we reach out to. And a lot of times they have their contact info on their LinkedIn profile. They have it as a post. They have it somewhere easily available. If you can't find it, hunter.io. There's other email tools that you can use. Like there's always Rocket Reach, or there's a ton of different tools that you can use to find different emails. But I just like hunter.io because it's usually pretty accurate. And we want to make sure that we're contacting the right people. We don't want to just like spray everybody with our emails. We don't just want to email a ton of people. We want to email like one person who handles all the content and use them as our contact. So LinkedIn combined with hunter.io really helps us find the right email address. So once we have their email address, now that we've gone through figuring out conventions, checking out their LinkedIn profile, looking for their email, if you want a cold call, you can find their phone number, but I find that people are a lot warmer to emails. If you go through all of this stuff and you still can't find their email, let's say it's like for some reason you can't find it, you can always send them a message on LinkedIn. You can just connect with them and say, hey, I'm a writer. I'd love to send you a pitch. Would you be willing to share your email address so I can send it over there? And if they connect, they're like, sure, my email is this, right? It's really easy to just connect with them on LinkedIn. If nothing's working, if you can't find on LinkedIn or anywhere else or hunter.io, you can literally just connect with them and ask, like, hey, I want to send you a pitch. Would you be willing to share your email so I can send it to your inbox? You can also send them an in-mail. Like you can send them your pitch as an in-mail. I definitely would be kind of careful about using your in-mail credits because you only get so many. So I usually prefer to like connect with them, ask if we can send a pitch through their inbox. But you can always send it as an in-mail. You can just say, hey, I have a pitch for you. Here it is. Would love to connect via email. So you give them the pitch in the in-mail. Then at the bottom, you just say like, hey, would love to connect over email, and give them your email if they want to reach out to you. So all of these different things, there's plenty of ways to contact. Oh, we got some shuffling. There's plenty of ways to contact, good boy, Bear, the right person. There's plenty of ways to find the emails. And a lot of times when I find that writers come to me and say they can't find contact info or they're struggling to find it, I think it's just that they don't build their research skills enough. You have to really dig in sometimes. You have to go through these multiple different steps. You have to check their website. You have to check the masthead. You have to check different resources that provide email addresses. You can check conferences or press releases or LinkedIn or try hunter.io or send an in-mail or send a connection request. There's really like no shortage of ways to reach out to someone to find their email address or even just send them something over the internet, right? You could always, I know some writers tweet people, right? They say, hey, they send someone a tweet and say, at whatever, I'd love to send you a thing. Can you DM me your email? And that works too. Same thing with Instagram and Facebook. People send DMs to people when they follow them on there or they see a certain editor. There are plenty of ways to reach out to these people. People have tons of profiles. I know that Twitter is more of the more accepted way to like find people's emails or send them pitches or send an LOI. But Instagram, I think, is kind of coming up in that way too. Lots of DMs and sharing stuff. But I think the way that writers can just kind of get across with this is just making sure that you kind of put in the research. You don't kind of do it lazily, right? You don't want to be lazy about finding contact info because it kind of reflects on your whole process. It reflects on your whole writing, right? What ends up happening is like, you're like, oh, I tried 3 things and it didn't work and now I can't find their info. Like, just tell me what it is, right? It's like, well, what if you get an assignment? Like how much effort are you really putting into it? And if you can't, use all these resources to find a specific email or even reach out, you don't even have to find their email. Just send them a message on LinkedIn, a tweet, a DM, whatever. If you can't even get to that point, then that kind of reflects on you being able to do the assignment. And people pay attention to that. I can tell you, like, there are tons of times where writers end up half-assing it or not doing the whole process, and then their work is shoddy. And the editor's like, I made a huge mistake. And we want to make sure that we're putting in an effort before we kind of like get to our last resorts, like before we start, really lazily going about it. So I think what's really important here is to make sure that you are researching all these different ways to find someone's contact info. And then when you get their contact info, you want to make sure that you're not being sleazy or overly zealous or crazy with your marketing. you don't want to just get their info and then spam them. Like, that's a big no-no. So that'll be our next thing we're going to go over. So if you have any questions, pop them in the chat. I'm going to do a quick pup date. We're going to have a quick fun pup date. But if you have questions, pop them in the chat. Let's do a pup date. We only have one pup right now. So he's doing some licking. Oh, you want a Treato? Charlotte, you have to go to your hobbit hole. Charlotte, go to your hobbit hole. We're working on this, people. We're trying. Charlotte, you have to go to your hobbit hole. Go to your hobbit hole. Charlie. There you are. Come on. Go to your hobbit hole. Oh, come on, Charlie. You have to go to your hobbit hole. Come on. Charlie says she doesn't want to right now. All right. There we go. Good job, guys. We tried. We tried to get her in her hobbit hole, but she said she didn't want to. Good job. Yeah, I know. It's hard being on camera, Charlotte. It's hard. So, here we go. There. I messed up my shirt a little bit. Okay. So, one question I see in here is, have I ever had someone get mad when I found their email? No. No, I haven't. And here's why. This hasn't happened because I don't email people garbage stuff, number one. Number two, me finding their email is kind of going through the test of being able to contact them, right? It's going through the test of like, I didn't just buy a list off of somewhere and just say like, here's 1,000 emails. Let me just go like spam everybody. It's part of the test of being able to contact people. And what we do is like, if we can't find their contact info, if it ends up being, this thing where it's just really hard to find and we can't seem to get it together, we're resorting to LinkedIn messages or tweets or DMs or posts or whatever. We're resorting to that to still try to find their info after we've gone through all these other steps. So then when we find their email and contact them, we're not sending them sleazy, salesy messages. We're sending them our LOI, asking if they need help. This has been kind of my principle that I built a lot of my business on, is like, I'm not reaching out to sell you something or convince you need content or sell you on the idea of working with me. I'm giving you information and facts. I'm saying like, do you need help? Are you working on content? Do you need help with that? I can help you. You have to go to your hobbit hole. Charlotte, go to your hobbit hole. Go to your hobbit hole. Oh, gosh. Okay. So you have to, you have to make sure that in your LOI, you're saying, do you need help? Don't worry. I'm qualified. Here's my clients. Here's the niches I work in. Let me know if you need help. Like, that's it. I'm not going in there like being like, 85% of people said you need a blog right now. Like, okay, like I used to do that. Straight up, I used to do that. And it was something that just like, it hardly ever worked. They would come back to me and be like, that's nice, but we need help with this. Or, okay, but like we actually have this other project, right? And that's a big pain in the butt. So I waste all these times finding stats or like creating these LOIs to like convince them that this was a good idea. And it's just like not going to work. You kind of have to match that they've already had the idea. That's why we ask if they need help. If they need help, then it's a lot easier to go in there and go on the project that they already have in mind. We're just asking, do you need help with content? Like, do you have something in mind that you're working on that you could use an extra writer, or you could use someone to kind of come in and take over and you can go off and do the other marketing stuff? That's what we're doing. We're not rolling in there like finding their email and then being annoying. Like, that's missing the whole point. We're finding the emails so that we can work with people to help them with their content, to create content that makes a difference, that helps them grow their audience or helps them sell their products in a non-sleazy, salesy way. But we're not trying to find emails to be annoying. I think the only time when someone gets upset about you finding their email is when you go in there and you bother them. So I've known, there was a few writers that I found who ended up finding someone's contact info, and then they would like send them an LOI, and like 2 days later they'd follow up, and 2 days later they'd follow up, and 2 days later, and it was just like, no, like you send the LOI and then you go about your business, and if they respond, that's when you kind of start the whole thing. But we're not finding their email to be like, why aren't they responding? Like, they should be following up with me. Like, they should need this content. It's like, nope, no. That's when people get mad, is when you kind of abuse the email address. Not only have you found it, but you abuse it. So send your LOI, make it non-sleazy, non-salesy. I have LOI examples below if you go They're linked below, but you can also go to mandyellis.com/bundle, and I have LOI examples in there that are like not salesy, not sleazy. They work for me in my business. But they get annoyed when you kind of pester them or you like follow up. So you send your LOI, and then for me, when I send an LOI, that's it. I just send it unless someone gets back to me. If someone gets back to me, then I kind of like follow up with them and maybe have a call, or they say, hey, like, thanks for reaching out. We're not ready yet. Follow up in 6 months. Then I follow up with them. But people aren't mad that you found their email. They're mad when you get salesy and sleazy and annoying. All right. Yeah, basically, we're not finding their email and then subscribing them to a drip campaign. Some people do that, but I'm pretty sure you can't do that. I'm pretty sure that's illegal. You can't find someone's email and add them to your email list. Like, I think you're not allowed. There's like GDPR and all kinds of stuff. I may be wrong on this, but I'm pretty sure you can't just take someone's email and put it on your email campaign and just like go along. Like, that's a big no-no. So we don't want to find their email to bother them, and we don't want to find their email to like follow up. Send your LOI. Send lots of them, move on with your life. Follow up with the people who answer you. But the whole point isn't that you just send an LOI and then follow up with someone incessantly until they hire you. Like, that's annoying. So the other thing I wanted to say here is that when we're getting our marketing done to the right clients at the right time, one of the things that I get asked often is that when should I email them, right? When should I send a message? When should I reach out? What is the best time? What's the best day? How do I do this, to make sure they get a response? So this is, to me, has always been an interesting question, because I used to struggle with this a lot. I was like, all right, how do I figure it out? How do I get exactly to where they are? Like, I just want to have the perfect time. If I have the perfect time, they'll answer me, and then they'll be excited, and we'll work together. And the thing is like, over time and through talking with other writers, like, you can't control them. That's it. You can only control your own activity. You can only control how many LOIs you send. You can only control how you speak to someone, not salesy, not sleazy. You can only control your side of it. You can't force someone to respond to you. You can't you can't convince them that they have to respond right now. You can't control them. So when you're thinking about sending your stuff, the answer is right now. The answer is forever and always right now. So Vicky says in Canada it's illegal. So in Canada it's illegal to add someone to your email campaign without them signing up. I think it's the same thing here in the US. That you can't just like add email addresses to a campaign and go buck wild with it. So the answer is always right now. There is no perfect time. You can't manage the schedule of the hundreds, if not thousands of people that you're sending your LOIs to or your pitches to. And we all know, like, editors at any magazine, trade magazines, local magazines, national magazines, big giant glossies, all of them are busy all the time. They get hundreds of pitches, if not thousands of pitches a week. They're doing stuff all the time. The answer is now. There is no perfect time to go in there and catch them in their inbox. So I think that this kind of misses the principle. The principle is we have to control our marketing and get it done. We can't be sitting around waiting for 7 p.m. on a Sunday afternoon or on a Sunday night because that's when they check their inbox, right? That just doesn't work. I think the whole point is like, we just have to get it done. Just have to get it done right now. And I used to think that it was just about that. It was just about like, when's the best time to get a response? But you can't control them. You can't control what people are doing. They're off doing their own stuff. And if anything, after the pandemic and COVID, people's work schedules, people's vacation schedules, all of the ways that they run their business, like even if they, they're working from home, they're doing all this new stuff, like it's really hard to figure that out. And if you spend time worrying about catching them in their inbox, you just won't get very much marketing done. That's what I've kind of noticed. When people wait until they try to figure out, okay, I'll send all my messages at this time because it's the best time. Like, okay, it's just slows your process and makes it more difficult. The other thing that I wanted to mention while we're kind of like going through the end of here, and if you have questions or comments or whatever, throw them in the chat. We'll pop them up. We'll talk about them. Is I've had a lot of writers that I've talked to and students and just people I know in the writing industry who track responses, right? They have a little tracking pixel to see if someone opened it or to see like they're sending these LOIs and they're like, no one's answering me. I want to make sure that they're getting back to me. And I think that for me personally, I don't think that's useful. Worrying about who's opening it doesn't matter. Even if you get 100% of people that you send LOIs to opening them and you have a 0 response rate, that changes nothing, right? Like now we're kind of like, okay, they're opening them, but they're not responding. So I think what you really want to do is look for responses. That's the key metric. Are people getting back to you? Are people responding to the type of LOI you're sending? Are they responding to your pitches? Do they like your ideas? Are you focusing in? That piece is a lot more important than worrying about if it got delivered to someone's inbox and if someone opened it. So I know a lot of writers like to use these tools that say like, okay, it got delivered, like I saw it, it got delivered, and they opened it, the tracking pixel went off because they opened it, and they like, but they didn't respond. It's like you're wasting your time on the wrong metrics. The metric is, did they get back to you? That's it. The metric is like, can we have a conversation? And a lot of times I find that that's kind of a roadblock for writers, is they use that as an opportunity to not do more marketing because they're like, well, it seems to be not working. They're opening them and not getting back to me. Or they're using it as a way to waste time. They're like, oh, well, let me go check my tracking pixel and like check these like, no, we want to spend our time with clients who care about their content, people who are getting back to us, people who are interested in working with us, right? That's what we want to do. We don't want to spend our time worrying about if it got delivered or opened. If like we live in an age where it's very rare that things don't get delivered. And even if they do, they might have gone to spam. Maybe that was a mistake. That's something we need to know about. But you can always test that. Like send some emails to friends and family and say like, hey, is this actually delivering? Is it going to your spam? What's going on? Test that first and then worry about responses. I think the idea of focusing on whether or not people open it is like not important. And a new thing that's happening is with all of the changes from iOS 14. I remember reading this or hearing this, like, or there's a bunch of privacy stuff going on where there's not going to be as much tracking of email open rates. So even if you send emails like me, who sends an email every week about freelance writing advice, which you can join if you want, it's linked below, and you can also just go to my website. Or you can get my free pricing guide to join it. So if you go to mandyellis.com/pricing guide and you get the pricing guide, you get more tips and tricks every week in my email. So what's going to happen is now that I send my weekly email, right? I send my weekly email out, and what ends up happening is now I'm going to have a different open rate. My open rate isn't going to be as accurate because the privacy stuff is kicking in. So that means that there won't be as many tracking things saying like someone opened it and someone didn't. And that kind of changes a lot of things. And I think the more people realize how many trackers have been on them, and I think the more people realize how much privacy has been kind of not private in terms of Facebook and iOS and email tracking, all that stuff, I think more and more that stuff will become irrelevant in terms of sending our LOIs. It may not become irrelevant in terms of email marketing. There may be some other different thing. But in terms of sending our LOIs and knowing who opens them and who doesn't, I think that's just going to become more and more irrelevant as people clamp down on privacy settings. What you really care about is people getting back to you. Because if they open it, it's not really always giving you a chance to follow up. If they respond, that's really a chance to follow up. That's really a way for you to get in there and say like, hey, thanks so much for getting back to me. Yeah, I would love to chat about your project. Or yeah, I would love to go over some ideas I have for you based on what I've seen in terms of your content and what I've seen in terms of your competitors and what's kind of trending in the industry. Okay. Yeah, so there's other stuff too. Like I know some writers who have Protonmail. So Protonmail doesn't even let you track anything. So if I send an email to someone with Protonmail, I won't know any information about it. And the more people that switch to something like Protonmail, or they switch to a product that like some sort of inbox product where you can't really track what they're doing, those trackers are kind of becoming irrelevant, right? What we're really going to get here is we just want them to get back to us in terms of a response. If they can give us a response, that really opens the door for us. The only time, my last little thing here, the only time is when I follow up on an LOI, if I don't get a response, is if it's a company I really think is cool, something I'm really interested in, something I think is really neat, a company I've been following for a long time, like maybe they're a startup and now they have enough money to like, I can see that they're expanding their marketing and I'm like, ooh, I would love to work with them because their stuff is so cool. That's when I follow up on an LOI. And that's rare. I mean, that's probably like it's probably 1% or less. And those are very specific companies that I've been following. Like I've seen the cool things they've done. I know that they're adding different things within their industry that are really kind of like on the cutting edge. That's really neat stuff that I personally find fascinating or that I am invested in kind of their journey, but it's a really small percentage. And that's stuff I follow up with because I'm interested in working with them. But like I said, you end up in this position where like you're only following up with a very small percentage of people who haven't gotten back to you. Oh yeah, so I guess you can do it in Gmail too. So in Gmail, you can turn it on, like load remote content. So this is another thing. There's all these types of privacy settings that are be coming up. So don't get stuck on this roadblock of who opens and who doesn't. If you're really concerned about your stuff going to spam, send it to somebody else that you know. Send it to a friend, a family member, a random other writer. Go into a Facebook group and say, hey, I'm worried that my LOIs are going to spam or my pitches are going to spam. Can I send stuff to you to see if it goes to your spam folder? If you're really worried about spam, there's plenty of other ways to check it than like a random tool that wastes your time. So let's kind of close it up here. We'll do one more pup date. Let's see if we can get her over to her hobbit hole. Can you go to your hobbit hole? She's sitting down here by me. No, you have to go to your hobbit hole. Come on. Go to your hobbit hole. Go to your hobbit hole. There we go. We did it. Good job. Good job, guys. Good job. You look like a small mouse. Bear, you are a little gentleman. You look adorable, and I love you. All right, we only have one more thing in here. Here you go. Good job, guys. You're the best. You guys are basically the whole show. That's the deal, is you guys are the whole show. All right, cool. So let's just touch base on this. So we want to make sure that when we find our client email addresses, there are multiple different ways we can do this. For trade magazines, it's usually easy to find on their website or a press release. For bigger magazines, you can use different resources. You can guess the convention. You can find a press release. You can use something like Media Bistro or the Travel Magazine database. There's tons of databases where you can find email addresses too. You can reach out to them on social media, send them a DM or a tweet or something and say, hey, I'd love to pitch you. You can reach out on LinkedIn. You can send them a pitch in an email if you really want to go that route. There are lots of ways to find contact information. You can also then use hunter.io to find company email addresses for businesses. And that really finding their email address is just, oh, thanks, Getty. Getty's wishing everybody a good 4th. Yeah, so you too, Getty. I hope you enjoy your holiday weekend. So we want to make sure that we do all these things to get their email, right? We find the email. That's part of the test. The second part is that we send them an LOI or a pitch in a non-spammy way. We just send it and we hope that they respond and we move on with our life. Don't worry about tracking it. Don't worry about what time of day is best or what day is best. The time is now. The time will always be now. And then make sure that you're not paying attention. Like, no one cares if they open it. We don't. It's not a result it doesn't matter. What we care about is responses. We care about people getting back to us. We care about work coming out of it, right? That's what we care about is, are we getting responses? Is this working? Last thing, if you're worried about spam, send it to somebody else to see if it's spam. Don't keep sending things and being like, oh, I need all these tracking things to tell me if it's spam or not. Don't worry about it. If you're like, don't use the tracker things are not useful. Just send it to a friend or a family member or some writers and see whether or not it ends up in spam or not. That'll tell you a lot. Cool. So that's what I have for finding email addresses, for getting all our stuff done, making sure we get our marketing done in like a good way, not the sleazy, spammy, gross way. And I hope that everybody has a really great 4th or, is getting some rest time. I think a lot of people are getting a 3-day weekend. So I hope everybody enjoys their time off. And thanks for joining me today. I hope this was helpful and I will see you next Friday. Bye.